In this podcast episode, Ben Shapiro passionately advocates for the confirmation of Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense, emphasizing Hegseth's military background and principled stance against the far left's influence on the military. Shapiro highlights Hegseth's qualifications, including his service as a military colonel and his education at Princeton, arguing that he possesses the right principles to lead the Department of Defense. Shapiro expresses confidence that Hegseth will be confirmed despite anticipated opposition from Democrats, who he believes will attempt to undermine his nomination. The podcast opens with a discussion of the confirmation hearings for Hegseth, which began with protests from groups like Code Pink. Shapiro recounts the chaotic scenes at the hearings, where protesters were removed for their disruptive behavior. He contrasts their antics with Hegseth's composed and articulate opening statement, which included a heartfelt acknowledgement of his faith and a commitment to restoring accountability within the military. Shapiro praises Hegseth's focus on military readiness and his rejection of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that he believes detract from the military's primary mission. Shapiro also critiques the Biden administration's handling of military affairs, particularly the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which he describes as a catastrophic failure. He argues that Hegseth's approach would prioritize merit and performance over political correctness, a stance that resonates with Shapiro's vision for a more effective military. Hegseth's commitment to accountability and his willingness to remove those responsible for the Afghanistan debacle are highlighted as essential qualities for the next Secretary of Defense. As the conversation shifts, Shapiro addresses President Biden's recent press conference, where Biden attempted to rewrite the narrative surrounding his presidency. Shapiro points out the inconsistencies in Biden's claims about illegal immigration and the Afghanistan withdrawal, arguing that the president's record is marred by failures and lies. He emphasizes that Biden's administration has allowed criminality to flourish and has failed to secure the border effectively. The podcast also touches on the ongoing wildfires in California, where Shapiro criticizes the federal government's response and the state's mismanagement of resources. He highlights the absurdity of the federal aid being offered to residents affected by the wildfires, suggesting that the amount is insufficient given the scale of the disaster. Shapiro argues that California's leadership should be held accountable for their failures in fire management and resource allocation. In a broader context, Shapiro discusses the implications of the upcoming Trump administration, particularly regarding foreign policy and national security. He notes that the potential for a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas is influenced by the prospect of Trump's return to office. Shapiro expresses skepticism about the terms of any deal that might emerge, emphasizing that Israel must prioritize its security and not allow Hamas to reconstitute itself in Gaza. The podcast concludes with a discussion of the current state of legal academia, featuring a guest appearance by Ilia Shapiro, who has written a book titled Lawless: The Miseducation of America's Elites. Shapiro shares his experiences with the legal education system and the challenges posed by the prevailing ideologies within law schools. He argues that the integrity of legal education is crucial for the future of American democracy and that reforms are necessary to address the issues of bias and political correctness in legal training.